Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Welcome you all to the second evening of this special talk on 5 verses on enlightenment. I think most of you came yesterday. Those who have come this evening to attend this talk, for them only, Swami Sarvapriyananda is the head of the New York Center. He came in this country in 2015 and was posted in New York Center as minister in church in 2017. Today we have an additional part. Many people actually requested us over phone and emailed us whether we have any Q&A session or not. Yesterday, we did not organize or arrange for Q&A session, but today we will have Q&A session, question and answer session after the talk. Few things for Q&A session. There will be 40 to 45 minutes talk, and then there will be 15 minutes question and answer. For question and answer, we need only bullet question, and you know that there will be only 15 minutes question and answer session, so we know there will be thousands of questions, but we cannot take all the questions. And if you like, you can email to New York Center, and Sarvapriyananda will be glad to reply those questions. So please do that. He is very prompt to reply the email. So without ado, I request Swami Sarvapriyananda to continue his talk, and please welcome him with a big applause. Thank you.
Om Asato ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back, and welcome to those who have come for the first time this evening. I offer my pranams and my deep gratitude to Revered Swami Prasannatmanji Maharaj for affording me this opportunity. We have a lot of work this evening before us, so I'll get right down to it. Yesterday, we saw the first and only the first of 5 verses on enlightenment, and you must be thinking, at this rate, how are we going to get enlightened? But that was the central verse, the most important verse. And what was accomplished in that verse is that two things, two steps. One is, I am not the body, not the mind. On what principle? Na drishya vastu. I am not an object. I am not a thing. The subject is never the object. So whatever, this is a technique of practice in Advaita Vedanta. Whatever you can designate as this, you are not that. Whatever I can cognize as this, I cannot be it, because I am the one which knows this. So this book, am I a book? Of course not. This body, this, so I cannot be the body. This breath, clearly this breath, I cannot be the breath, because this thought, I cannot be the thought too, because this thought. This understanding, even this Vedantic understanding, it's also this. It's a function of the intellect. I cannot be it. And if you go beyond, push back as far as we can, you hit a blankness. Blank, nothing. But this blankness, I cannot be it. What I am really, what we are really, can never be designated by this. And yet we cannot say that we don't exist. We do exist, but not as an object. So I am not but the body. Why? Because this body. I am not the breath, this breath. I am not the mind, this mind. Notice that we are not saying that the body does not exist or the mind does not exist. Of course it does. It's there. The world is appearing, the body is there, mind is there, but I am not it. This consciousness, why are we calling it consciousness even? Because one thing is undeniable. Whatever I am, that one is aware of all this. So I must be, in some sense, consciousness or awareness. Not in the normal sense in which we understand our thinking processes, because that's also this. But the awareness, the non-objectifiable subject, that I am. That was step one. Biggest step, that's most essential. But then the next thing that Shankaracharya sings about in this 5 verses, the first verse, he says, if you remember, from the highest God, from Brahma till down to the merest ant, I am the one consciousness in all beings. Not just one consciousness in one body and mind, but the consciousness is common to all bodies and minds. We are one reality. See what a tremendous claim that is. Far deeper, more radical than all our claims of brotherhood or sisterhood. That's almost always rhetoric. But here it's a claim is we are in fact. The most fundamental fact of the universe about ourselves is that we are one consciousness. Whether one accepts it or not, one understands it or not, even to conceive of the fact that Shankaracharya is saying it's an accomplished fact. We are already one and forever one. It's beautiful to think of. Somebody once wrote to me. I keep taking these detours, but time permitting. But anyway, it's interesting. It's relevant too. Do you remember that Malaysian Airways, unfortunately, they lost 2 aeroplanes a few years back? One was which got lost completely. And there's a funny story about a very unfunny incident. They used to have an advertisement that fly with us and lose yourself. Really, it was an advertisement. Luckily they discontinued it afterwards. Anyway, that's not funny. But the other plane they lost was, if you remember, it was shot down by mistake or something. But people died. And then somebody wrote to me, the plane was from, I think, Amsterdam or somewhere. And somebody wrote to me from Amsterdam, I was in India at that time, that my girlfriend was in that plane and she died there. Can I ever, can I know her last thoughts? So it was a very touching kind of email. And I said, what does Advaita say? So I said, Advaita does not say that we can know the last thoughts or any thoughts of another person, unless you are a telepath. A Patanjali yogi might be able to know the thoughts of another person, but whether that person, the yogi, will be able to know the thoughts of somebody else at a distance, the last thoughts, that's doubtful. But Advaita Vedanta says something deeper. That you and your friend who perished, whose body perished in that tragedy, you and your friend are forever one. At the deepest level of our being, we are actually one. So in that sense, we are always one with all those who are beloved to us, but Advaita Vedanta says all those who are not beloved to you, you're also one with them. So there is no likes and dislikes here. We are one with everybody in the universe. So that was the second step. What's the first step? Not body, not mind, beyond body and mind, witness consciousness. Second step, one consciousness in all beings. But now, notice one thing. At first, the subject-object distinction was, to begin with, at our level, is I am the subject here, and apart from this, everything is other for me. You all and everything else is separate from me. After Vedantic discussion, this kind of analysis, now where are we? The world, of course, is separate from me, but this body is also not me, mind is also not me, I am the pure consciousness. Now what we have only done is, we have moved the line of separation. First it was at the skin, now we have moved it back to consciousness. Now it's still not non-duality. Have you noticed that? It's still consciousness and the not conscious universe. I am the one consciousness in all beings. But then what about the rest of it? What about the world? What about the bodies? What about the minds? What are they? Do we appreciate the problem, the position we are in now? Right now, it's still not non-duality. It's still not Advaita. Because now there is a difference. Earlier there was a difference between me, the person, and everything else. Now there's a difference between me, the one consciousness, and everything else. The world, body, mind, and all of this. So real non-duality will now be established in the second verse. The whole teaching of non-duality will be complete here in the second verse. I'm going to chant the second verse and then translate. Brahmevaham idam jagatcha sakalam chinmatra vistaritam sarvam chaitadavidyaya trigunaya ashesham maya kalpitam ittham yasya dridamati sukhatari nitye pare nirmale chandalo astu satu dvijo astu gurur ityesha manisha mama. Brahmevaham idam jagatcha sakalam jinmatra vistaritam. What does that mean? I am Brahman, and this entire universe is an appearance of I, the pure consciousness. Pure consciousness, chit, is jinmatra, consciousness alone. Literally, if you translate, chinmatra means consciousness alone. I am translating that as pure consciousness. And this pure consciousness and Brahman are the same thing, so don't be confused by the words. I am Brahman, I am this pure consciousness. Well, that's good, that's what we got yesterday. But now what's the new thing that you are saying? This entire universe, this physical universe out there, including this body, and the mental universe, thoughts, feelings, emotions, the external universe, the internal universe, all of this is not separate from me, the consciousness. I, the consciousness alone, am appearing as the object of consciousness. You see, a big step has been taken now. Instead of saying this is apart from me, all of this is nothing but me. How is this possible? We have experiences by which we can understand. For example, our dreams. So you meet people, you go to places, there is space and time and people and events in our dreams. The moment we wake up, we realize all those people were nothing other than the dreamer's mind. My mind alone projected them. All those places, the space and the time and the events, all that I dreamt about, they were nothing apart from my dreaming mind. Is that not true? Exactly in the same way, that's an example. Exactly in the same way, not that Advaita is saying that my mind is dreaming up this universe. No, that would be subjective idealism. if you think, what subjective idealism? You're living in Berkeley. Subjective idealism is connected to Bishop Berkeley. After whom is the university and the town named after Bishop Berkeley? Yes? Yes. So this place is named after the greatest subjective idealist of them all. So everything is a projection of my mind, just like a dream. So that would be subjective idealism. But Advaita is not subjective idealism. It is saying that even the mind is a projection in consciousness. So mind and body and the universe, they are all appearances in consciousness, just as the objects in my dream are appearances in the dreaming mind. Like that. Example. Just as all the people and the objects in the dreaming mind do not exist as a second thing apart from the dreamer's mind, similarly, this entire universe which I experience does not exist as a second thing apart from I, the pure consciousness. Not I, the mind. I, the pure consciousness. So the whole thing appears in consciousness, not as a second thing apart from it. Somebody asked a teacher in the Himalayas, wait a minute, they were asking in Hindi, wait a minute, you are saying that I am everywhere in this entire universe, I am all over, but I am so little, I am here, I am not even there. How can I be everywhere? How can everything be in me? I'm right here, I am not even there. And the answer was, the teacher said, but here and there, are they not both in your experience? What does he mean? Imagine if we were dreaming. In my dream, suppose I'm standing in this big church and I clearly see I am here, I am not there. But when I wake up, what will happen? The entire church and here and there would have been in my mind only. So, all of time and space, notice that it is all experienced in awareness. Consciousness. This is non-duality. Brahmaiva hamidam jagatcha sakalam jinmatra vistaritam. The entire universe is an appearance in consciousness. If you take a step back and think about it, what is the relationship between consciousness and its objects? Let's put it in the most most scientific way we can do it in today's world. What is the relationship between consciousness and matter? Here is matter. This is matter. Body is matter. And I am aware. We are all aware. What is the relationship between the two? Are they the same? Does one come from the other? Are they different? So there are different answers which we get from in ancient Indian philosophy. The first one is that consciousness comes from matter. One option. Consciousness comes from matter. The second one is matter comes from consciousness. Third one is neither come from the other. They are parallel realities. They all exist together. The fourth option is both are empty. Both are void. And the fifth one is the Advaitic option. Let's quickly take a look at each one. What do they say? What is the first one? That consciousness comes from matter. Who says this? The materialist says this. The ancient Indian materialist said that the body is made of the elements and somehow it produces consciousness. Now, our modern materialist says exactly the same thing in a much more sophisticated way. That here is the living body and in that there is a nervous system and a brain, and somehow the nervous system and brain are producing consciousness. So that's the state-of-art explanation of consciousness in today's world. And you might say, why should we not stop right here? What the neuroscience is telling us, stop there. Why go on to all these ancient philosophies? The problem is that we don't have the slightest clue how this body and this living brain produces consciousness. You might say, no, just a minute. The neurons are functioning and the neuron activity of the neurons produces consciousness. Yes, but how? If you ask neuroscientists, the answer will be they have got something called promissory materialism. Promissory materialism is that it is matter which is producing consciousness, and it is true that we don't know how, but we will know. Give us 30-40 years. This is really the answer that I've got from some of the leading brains, leading minds. A philosopher who's also a biologist in NYU, he told me this, that I'm firmly convinced that its living tissue produces consciousness. Living brain and nervous system produces consciousness. How? It is also true, he said, that we don't know exactly how. But his example was this. Let me put it to you. A very interesting example given by some of the leading scientists today, materialist, reductionist scientists who want to reduce consciousness to matter. The argument is this. Interesting argument. 100 years ago, life was considered to be a mystery. And it was thought that nobody can explain what life is. It's a great mystery. And then there's this scientist and philosopher, he told me, today we understand life, the processes which we call blanket term life, that those processes are understood down to the molecular level. So we understand it now. 100 years ago we did not understand it. Now we understand almost a great deal about how life comes about. In terms of absolutely material, very sophisticated activities going on in living tissues, what is called life, we understand that now. Similarly, right now we don't understand how neurons firing in the brain can produce consciousness, but give us 30 or 40 years, we will understand. Promissory materialism. What would Vedanta say to that? What would Advaita say to that? Advaita has an interesting, immediately the answer will be, what you say about life and what you are saying about consciousness, they are not on parallel. It's not a good example. It's what is called in philosophy a category mistake. Why is it a mistake? Notice, by the clue which Shankaracharya just gave us, anything that you can designate as this, you are not that. Now life, can you designate life as this life? Yes. So this life is explained, here is life, very good. This life is explained in terms of this matter. So this explains this, no problem. One higher level material process is explained by a lower level material process. And Advaita Vedanta understands this perfectly. In Advaita Vedanta, life is prana, and that's also material and objective. But consciousness, Chaitanya, pure consciousness, can never be designated by this. So when you say, I will explain consciousness in terms of brain, can you call it this brain? Yes. So brain is under the category of this object. And pure consciousness is in the category of subject. Can never be objectified. You are claiming, philosophically speaking, it's a big jump you are making, that the pure subject which can never be objectified can somehow be explained by objective processes in neurons. Big claim. You have to walk the talk. Show me how it is done. And I am not alone. Luckily, at this time, if you Google hard problem of consciousness, this is exactly what is called the hard problem of consciousness. In fact, the term was coined by David Chalmers, who's the head of the Mind-Brain Consciousness Unit in NYU. And he's right there. He says, how can purely objective processes, just like what's going on in this building, in the electricity, similarly things are going on in the body, how can they explain first-person experiences, subjective experiences? None of these objective items have inner feelings and perceptions. And yet you do, I do. How? So he calls this the hard problem of consciousness. And his answer is, I will come to his answer, but he says that, see, you cannot explain it by objective processes. You just Google it, it's a very big thing. The hard problem of consciousness now. Of course, it's very divisive because there are a lot of people who are against it. The scientist whom I spoke to, I said, what do you think about David Chalmers' hard problem of consciousness? He said, oh, David Chalmers, he comes up with one idea each worse than the earlier one. Not true, but anyway. So it's a huge debate, at least it's a debate. It's not just something in the ancient India 5,000 years ago or 1400 years ago in Shankaracharya. It's a very current, cutting edge cutting edge debate in consciousness studies today. We cannot explain consciousness in terms of matter. That's one position. And there are those who say, no, we can, but how? They don't have an answer. Like yesterday I gave the example of step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Step 1, 2, 3, lot of mathematics. Step 5, lot of mathematics. In between step 4 is miracle. A miracle. So, consciousness in terms of matter, very difficult to reduce consciousness to matter. Step 1, that is one option. The second option was matter is produced by consciousness. Who says that? Who says matter is produced by consciousness? All theistic religions say this. Theistic religions say that matter is produced by consciousness. Where did they say that? One common feature of all theistic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, in Hinduism you have Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Shaktism, all the religions which are God-centered. You know what one claim they make? God is the creator of this universe. What does it mean God is the creator of the universe? All that we consider to be matter and energy and time and space has been created by this deity. Now if you ask, make it philosophical, is this deity, is this God of yours, the claim you're making, is this God a conscious God or an unconscious God? Everybody will claim, no, God is conscious. So consciousness has created matter. This is the theistic model. The third model is that neither has created the other. They are, consciousness exists fundamentally, and matter and time and space and energy also exists fundamentally. Who says this? Sankhya. Prakriti Purusha. Prakriti is nature. Literally means nature. Time, space, matter, energy, they're eternal realities. And Purusha means pure consciousness. That's also an eternal reality. And the two exist. Really matter exists. Time, space, all of it exists. And consciousness is also present all over. And this is also David Chalmers' view. If you Google, he is talking about panpsychism. He says that we have to be ready for a crazy idea. And what's the crazy idea? That as matter, energy, time and space are fundamental, similarly we are to be ready for the idea it's quite possible that consciousness is also fundamental in nature. Not made out of matter, it exists by itself. He calls it panpsychism. He's talking about it now, in the 21st century, and Kapila and Patanjali talked about it 5,000 years ago, but same idea, panpsychism. Of course, he is heavily criticized for it. It does not faze him. In one interview, he says that if you think about the hard problem of consciousness long enough, you end up either being a panpsychist or going into administration. So, that is the third option. Consciousness and matter and energy, they all exist parallelly, not one from the other. The fourth option is the Buddhists I was talking about yesterday. The Madhyamaka Buddhists in the line of Nagarjuna. They say consciousness in the sense of self is also empty, and the object side, matter, time, space, energy is also empty, shunya, the void. What that emptiness means, that I'm not going to go into, but that's another point of view. And the last one is the Advaita option, where it says consciousness alone is the reality in which time, space, matter, energy appear. Now I'm going to prove this, that you, the consciousness, are the reality, and whatever you experience as this appears in you, the consciousness. Not you, the body, not you, the mind, but in you, the consciousness. We'll see two approaches to proving this. But before we go into the approaches, let me give you the simplest proof. The simplest proof is this, that what is your experience? Whatever you have experienced as object, have you not experienced it in your awareness? From any kind of experience, it's always possible only in awareness. It's the simplest fact of our life, and yet we do not notice that. Alright, two approaches to proving. What are we trying to prove? You are claiming, or Advaita is claiming, that the entire universe, which seems to be so solid out there, is an appearance in consciousness, is not apart from consciousness, does not constitute a second to consciousness, non-dual, not two. How do you say that? Can you prove it? One is the classical Advaitic approach based on text. If you ask a Pandit, a classical scholar in India, he will say this. And the second one will be a more philosophical approach, maybe more suited to our modern time. So, two approaches, quickly. The first approach is text-based. If you ask a classical scholar, that scholar will say, oh, you want me to prove that the universe is nothing other than consciousness? Okay. In the Upanishads, specifically, for example, Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a line which says, Tasmad va etasmad atmanah akasha sambhutaha. From this Brahman, which is none other than the Atman. Brahman means this reality Brahman, which is none other than you the self. What happened? Space emerged. And then Akashad Vayu, Vayu Agni, Agni Rapa, Adbhya Prithivi. From space emerged the wind, and from that emerged fire, from that emerged water, from that emerged the earth. And the five elements were created, and from which the entire universe has been created. So, now, if the five elements have emerged from the Atman, from Brahman or Atman, which is pure consciousness, then Atman, pure consciousness, becomes the cause, and all of these five elements, they become the effect. In Sanskrit, Karana and Karya. Cause and effect. No different from, say, if you take the wood as the cause and you make it into a podium, the podium is the effect. The material out of which it made is the cause, and the podium is the effect. Okay, so this. Whatever the cause is, it must be present in the effect. If you make a table out of wood, you can be sure that the table is wooden. If you make, in a classical example, a pot out of clay, you can be sure of one thing. You don't know what kind of pot it will be, but you can be sure of one thing. The pot is clay, obviously. If there is a wave in the bay out there, in the water out there, there's a wave. Whatever the wave is, you can be sure it's water. Obviously, because if the cause is water, the effect is going to be water. If the cause is clay, the effect, the pot will be clay. If the cause is wood, the effect, the table will be wood. There's no doubt about it. If the cause is pure consciousness, the effect will be pure consciousness. So, what you experience as the five elements in the old primitive cosmology, space and air and fire and water and earth. Now we'll have 170, 180, the periodic table and everything. But anyway, whatever you experience as object, if it has emerged from the subject, then it also must be, in some sense, pure consciousness alone. And therefore, proved. What were we trying to prove? Don't forget that this entire universe is nothing but pure consciousness. If it has emerged from pure consciousness, then the pure consciousness is the cause and this universe is the effect. So this universe must be nothing other than pure consciousness, though it doesn't look like that. Now at this point, and it's not really unreasonable also, because after all, when we dream, for example, we dream of people and places and houses and things and events and dogs and cats, and yet the fact is all of those are mind. In our dreams, they look pretty solid. If you try to dig into the ground in your dream and say, oh, this is mind, you won't find mind there. But it's a fact is the dreaming mind has dreamt up all of that. Consciousness alone appears as its object. Now at this point, a modern mind will object, pardon the pun, will object. All of this is based upon a text you quoted from the Upanishad and derived it from there. Upanishad said the five elements have emerged from consciousness, and so the five elements must be nothing other than consciousness. Fine. But suppose I don't believe all that. To an ancient mind, the Upanishads being part of the Vedas was proof, scriptural proof. In Sanskrit, Shruti Pramana. But now, we may be fine with scriptures and texts, but we would like independent reasoning, philosophical reasoning. Can you give me some kind of reasoning to think that this universe which I'm experiencing is in some sense consciousness? or at least is not apart from consciousness? Here is the reasoning. Very quickly. How do we know two things are one or different? What are we trying to understand? Is the universe one with me, the awareness, or is it really different and out there? Is it in me, the awareness, or is it out there? Is it different from me? The way to understand this is, there's a technique, there's a philosophical method, an analysis. If two things are always experienced together and can never be shown separately, then you have cause to think that they are in some sense one. The example here is that one Swami gave a very funny example. That a person, an elderly person who has a nice grin, you're thinking, are they real teeth or are they dentures? The only way to know, because every time you meet the person, the teeth are in the mouth, so you don't know really. The only way to know is if you pay him a sudden surprise visit and knock on his door suddenly, unannounced, and you come and he comes out with a grandfatherly toothless grin and the teeth are sitting there in the little box. Say, I see them separately, so they are not one and they are not integral, they're separate. But if there is no way, literally no way of experiencing something separately from another thing, you can never claim that they're really separate. What is the proof then? Why am I saying this? Now think of anything objective, anything that we have experienced in life, our parents, other people, what food that we have eaten, movies that we have seen, books that we have read, our own bodies, our own thoughts. Has anything ever been experienced apart from consciousness? Can anything be experienced apart from consciousness? Of course not. It's impossible. It's a trick question, because the moment you say experienced, consciousness is built into the question. How can you experience other than consciousness? So a physicist who's in New York, he's our senior most member in the ashram, Bill Conrad, he's 95. She said, Swami, I have designed an experiment to prove that things exist apart from consciousness. Okay, what is the experiment? Suppose in this room we set up a video camera like this and we all leave the room. Nobody is conscious here, no consciousness. When we come back and look at the recording, we will see the hall is still there, the church is still there, everything is there. You don't have to have a conscious observer. So this was an argument against Berkeley, after whom the university and the town are named. Somebody asked him, if everything is in your mind, suppose when nobody is looking, does that tree exist? Or only when you look the tree snaps into existence? That would be really odd. But his answer was very interesting. He said, when nobody is looking, the tree still exists. Why? Because God is looking. And therefore he proves the existence of God, because the universe exists only as an object of a mind. God's mind is always there, so that's why the universe exists. So that was his way of proving. He was a bishop, so he had to prove the existence of God. But we need not go so far. Just look at our own experience. Nothing can be experienced apart from consciousness. What was my answer to Bill Conrad? I said, true, when you set up the camera and you record this room, and we later on come back and look, and the room is still there. Well, setting up the camera and leaving the room and coming back and looking at the recording, all of it was in consciousness. That didn't convince him. So I had to give an example. I said, Bill, could it be possible, all of this experiment, could it be possible in a dream that you dreamt it all, and when you wake up suddenly you see everything? That setting up the camera, recording it and looking at the results of the recording, all of it was in a dream. I said, yeah, that could be possible. So why not here? Everything is in consciousness. Your entire experiment was in consciousness. See, this is how they are thinking. It's a very radical way of looking at it. You may say, you're talking crazy stuff. This is 21st century. And don't forget, you are on the doorsteps of UC Berkeley. Well, there is a 21st century philosopher, Galen Strawson, who wrote a very interesting article recently. He wrote that, he called it the hard problem of matter. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but very, very nicely written article. He says, in that article. You can Google it and find it, The Hard Problem of Matter. He says, actually David Chalmers should not worry. There is no hard problem of consciousness. Why? We are always conscious. We are experiencing ourselves as conscious all the time. Whenever we experience ourselves, we are experiencing ourselves as conscious by definition. True or not? But matter, that's another question altogether. Matter depends on my consciousness to reveal it. And when we are investigating this so-called real matter out there, the more we investigate it with modern science, particle physics, the more it is disappearing before our eyes. He writes that. The more we investigate matter, from solid hard matter to molecules, to atoms, to electrons and protons, to quarks, to strings, superstrings, what not, it goes down further and further down. Where does it end? It's disappearing before our eyes, he says. He says, matter is what has to be proved. Consciousness does not have to be proved. Imagine, what reversal. What is the proof that the universe exists? You tell me, what is the proof that the universe exists? The only proof that you can give me, anybody, any scientist can give me, the only proof is because I see it, because it is revealed to my instruments, because I hear it, I touch it. All you are proving is consciousness. True or not? All you are proving is consciousness. Where is the proof of matter? So that was Galen Strawson's point of view. 21st century philosophy, not Shankaracharya 1400 years ago. 1400 years ago, Shankaracharya says this entire universe is an appearance in consciousness. If you ask, why does it appear? Consciousness could have just left well enough alone, just be consciousness. And no, why does it appear in this way? There's a big question, I will not go into it. Shankaracharya's answer is, all of this, sarvam chaitad avidyaya trigunaya shesham maya kalpitam. Answer in Advaita always is Maya. So somebody out of exasperation said, see, it's no use arguing with you non-dualists. You'll either say Brahman or you'll say Maya. That's all. Really, it's exasperating talking with you guys. So, Maya, which is constituted of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, because of that it appears. But anyway, we can explain it in other ways also. It's an appearance because of that. Ittam yasya dridhamati sukhatare nitye pare nirmale. One who has this firm conviction, this clarity that I am this unbounded, limitless consciousness. He calls it the transcendental bliss. Sukhatare, pare sukhatare. Transcendental bliss. How do you understand it as bliss? Understand it as completeness, purnata, as wholeness. Why wholeness? Because if there is no second thing apart from you, the consciousness, then you are complete in yourself. Whatever seems to be an other is nothing other than you. Then you are complete. Where is your limit? Where is the limit to consciousness? Where does it stop? You say, no, it stops here at the tip of my finger. Are we not conscious of this? No, it stops at the door. I cannot see beyond the door. But you are aware there is something beyond the door. That's also in your awareness. What is not in your awareness? So, the entire object of experience is an appearance in consciousness. And that is why consciousness is without limit. Sukhatare pare nitye nirmale. It is pure consciousness because there is no second to it. There is no mixture in it. Let that person be a Chandala or a Brahmin or whatever, that person who has got this clarity about one's own reality, that person is my guru. This is the second verse. Let me quickly go through the other verses before we go into the Q&A. One thing here, I would be failing in my duty if I did not mention that. These verses are connected to the Mahavakyas. That's one explanation. What does that mean? All of Advaita Vedanta, it's so simple that it can be encompassed in these 5 verses, or it can be encompassed in one sentence. What is that sentence? Those sentences are called Mahavakyas, great sentences. Great sentences not in the number of words in that sentence, but in because they are profound. Arthato Mahan, profound in meaning. Example, the famous one which everybody has heard about is Tattvamasi, that thou art. That's from the Chandogya Upanishad. But there are 3 others. There are 4 which are taken as great sentences. There are many such sentences in the Upanishads, but 4 are conventionally taken, one from each of the 4 Vedas. So, Tattvamasi is taken from the Chandogya Upanishad, that thou art, which is from the Sama Veda. Then Prajnanam Brahma, consciousness is Brahman. That is taken from the Aitareya Upanishad, which is from the Rig Veda. And then Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. That is taken from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is from the Yajur Veda. And then finally, I am Atma Brahma. This very self is the absolute, is Brahman. That is taken from the Mandukya Upanishad, which is from the Atharva Veda. And they all mean the same thing, that you are that absolute, that we are actually that absolute. And the theory is, each of these verses is connected to one Mahavakya. So the first, sometimes the connection is clear, sometimes it's obscure. The first verse, connection is very clear. We talked about consciousness. So it is connected to that Mahavakya. Consciousness is Brahman, Prajnanam Brahma. That is used, that is the connection in the first verse. The second verse is even more clear. It starts off with the Mahavakya, Brahmaivaham, I am Brahman. Clearly that Mahavakya, I am Brahman, is the theme of the second verse. The third verse, the connection is more obscure. Let me read the third verse. Shashvan Nashwarameva Vishwamakhilam Nishchitya Vacha Guru Nityam Brahma Nirantaram Vimrishata Nirvyaja Shantatmana Bhutam Bhavicha Dushkritam Pradahata Samvidmai Pavake Prarabdhaya Samarpitam Swavapur Ityesha Manisha Mama. What does it mean? Shashvan Nashwarameva Vishwamakhilam. This entire universe is continuously changing, is destructible. It passes away. Everything. That story about the Buddhist monk who came to this transience of life, impermanence of life. The Buddhists are very big on this. So this Buddhist monk comes to the king, and the king complains, I have so many troubles. The enemies have surrounded the kingdom, and the rains have failed. We have famine in the kingdom, and the ministers are incompetent. And the prince, my son, doesn't seem to be interested in learning the ropes of being a king and all of that. So it's all terrible. And the monk said, "O king, this too shall pass." Okay. 10 years later, the monk was again passing through that kingdom, and he met the king, and he asked the king, "How are you?" And the king said, "Oh, by your blessing, sorry sir, everything has turned out well. The enemies have become friends, and there were plentiful rains, and there is a bountiful harvest, and the ministers have been replaced, and the prince has grown up to be a wonderful young man who is very interested in learning. So it's all good." And the monk said, "Yes. O king, this too shall pass." So, Shashvan Nashwarameva Vishwamakhilam. There is that saying, definition of a realist and a pessimist and an optimist. A pessimist is one who sees the long dark tunnel ahead. An optimist is one who sees the light at the end of the tunnel. And a realist is one who sees the long dark tunnel ahead and the light at the end of the tunnel and the next dark tunnel ahead. All this is continuously changing. Shashvan Nashwaram, to be destroyed tomorrow, to be lost tomorrow. And this is understood. This whole teaching is understood by the teaching of the Guru. The Guru teaches us. And Nityam Brahma Nirantaram Vimrishata. But all this is grounded in the unchanging pure consciousness which I am. Always concentrating on that, centered in the truth. Nirvyaja Shantatmana. Nirvyaja means without crookedness, with a pure mind. And Shantatmana means with a peaceful mind. These are the two qualifications. In Vedanta we talk about fourfold qualifications, but literally they can all be reduced to two things. A pure mind and a calm mind. Yeah. And those two are also connected. A pure mind can be a calm mind. with that kind of a mind, approach the Guru and listen to the teachings. Now, how is this connected to a Mahavakya, great sentence? The Mahavakya here is supposed to be Tat Tvamasi, that thou art. So I said it's an obscure connection. What is the obscure connection? Who says that thou art? The teacher says to the student, that thou art. So it says here, hearing from the teacher. So that kind of an obscure connection, that the teacher, what have you heard from the teacher? That thou art. Of course, a lot of Vedanta, but the basic idea is that thou art. And bhutam bhavicha dushkritam pradhavata sangvidmaye pavake. All accumulated karmas which have given results in the past and which are about to give results in the future, all of them are burned in the fire of enlightenment. That means this is the last life. There will be no more births produced by accumulated karma. And this life, the remaining part of this life, he says, prarabdhaya samarpitam swavapu, surrendering this body as long as it lives, surrendering it to the remaining karma, prarabdha karma. So there's a whole theory of activated karma and accumulated karma. I'm not going into that. Swami Vivekananda put it very beautifully. What is the attitude of the enlightened person to this particular body? Because I now know that I am not the body, but still this body appears. After enlightenment also, everything, the world will appear exactly as it is. Body will also appear, mind will also appear, but I know I am not it. Then what is my attitude to it? Swami Vivekananda says, heed then no more how body lives or dies. Karma will float it down. Let karma float it down. Go thou from place to place and help them out of Maya's veil. That way he puts it. So that's the life of an enlightened person. That's exactly what Shankaracharya is saying 1400 years ago. This is my firm conviction. Fourth verse. Ya tiryang naradevatabhir ahamityanta grihyate yadbhasa hridayaksha deha vishaya bhanti swato chetana tam bhasyai pihitarka mandala nibham spurtim sada bhavayan yogi nirvitamanaso hi guru ityesha manisha mama. That one consciousness which animates lower animals and human beings and the gods, it's the one consciousness which runs through all of them, which I see very clearly now. I understand, I grasp very clearly now. By whose light mind and the senses and the body are illumined, though they are not conscious in themselves. So the consciousness which we feel now, right now, is not the pure consciousness in itself. It's a reflection in the body-mind system. By that light, tam bhasye, it's like the sun hidden by a cloud. What is the cloud? Not knowing, not understanding this. That's the cloud. Now, spurtim sada bhavayan. Notice that even when the sun is hidden by a cloud, even the cloud is revealed by the sunlight. The sun behind it reveals the cloud, which is hiding the sun. Similarly, even though I do not know myself as pure consciousness, everything I know, what I see and hear and smell and taste and touch, is because of that pure consciousness. Its light is revealing everything in my life. That shining, everything shines. By its light, everything is lit up. Yogi nirvritamana sohi. So the yogi who is absorbed, who is centered in that one consciousness, such a one is my guru. This is my firm conviction. This is my wisdom. Last verse. Yat saukyam buddha ambudilesha leshata ime shakradayo nirvrita yat chitte nitaram prashanta kalane labdhva munir nirvritaha yasmin nitya sukham buddhau galitadhir brahmaiva na brahmaved yah kaschit sa surendra vandita pado nunam manisha mama. So this fifth verse concentrates on one aspect which is often neglected, the ananda aspect, the bliss aspect. It says that ocean of bliss, whose a little spray from that, a few drops from that, even the gods are mad after that kind of bliss. That entire ocean of bliss, I am. Yat chitte nitaram prashanta kalane labdva munir nirvritaha. In the enlightened one's mind, this is continuously revealed. Imagine, one great teacher says, why are the enlightened so happy all the time, effortlessly? Because, he says, imagine that you have got everything that has to be got in life. Suppose you have got it. You have done everything that has to be done in human life. Suppose you have done it. You have known everything that has to be known in life. So with these things, having got what has to be got, having done what has to be done, having known what has to be known, having got what has to be got, entire universe you have got it, because it is none other than Brahman. Having done what has to be done, you have attained enlightenment. That has to be done. That's done. Having known what has to be known, I am Brahman. You know it now, clearly. Wouldn't you be happy? Somebody said once, when I said this, somebody said, no, I would be bored. There's nothing more to do. No. The proof is, you look at the lives of those you consider to be enlightened, look at their lives. One thing they were not is bored. They were really full of life, full of joy. As long as they lived fully. Ingersoll, the great humanist here, Swami Vivekananda met him. And Ingersoll said, I don't believe in all your religion and spirituality. I believe in squeezing the orange of life dry, getting every drop out of it. And Vivekananda said, I will show you a better way of squeezing the orange dry. Yasmin nitya sukham vado galitadir brahmaivana brahmavit. In that infinite ocean of bliss, one who has become one, literally melted away into it, galitadhi. Then a beautiful phrase, brahmavit, brahmaivana brahmavit. That one is not a knower of Brahman. That one is Brahman. I am reminded of Nisargadatta. Some of you may have read, I am that, I think. Yes, I am that. In fact, yesterday I was at the SAN conference in Science and Non-Duality conference in San Jose, and the gentleman who organizes it, he said, you know where I got this idea? It's a big thing now, the SAN conference. He said, you know where I got this idea? I got this idea by reading Nisargadatta's I Am That. And then I started this in a small way. Now it's become a huge thing now all over the world. Anyway, now this Nisargadatta, who was regarded as an enlightened person, somebody asked him, somebody said, oh, you are a Brahmagyani, you are a knower of Brahman. And Nisargadatta, who tended to be quite rough, he snapped at him. Always to teach. He snapped at him. You're insulting me. And this man, poor man said, an insult. It's the highest praise we can give in our culture. That you are enlightened, you are a knower of Brahman. He said, no, it's an insult. I'm not a knower of Brahman. I am Brahman. Yes. This is exactly what is being said here. Brahmaivana brahmavid. If you say the enlightened person, the one, the Kena Upanishad says, the one who says I know does not know. The one who says I do not know knows. Of course, it's not talking about the man on the street. It's the person who is thoroughly trained in Vedanta and has practiced and is a spiritual practitioner. When that person says I do not know, he or she means it cannot be known as an object. I am that. I am not a knower of that. Brahmavit, not a knower of Brahman. Brahmaiva, definitely Brahman, but not a knower of Brahman. Yar Kaschit, whoever that person is. Shankaracharya says, Surendra Vandita Pada. There is no doubt in my mind, he is worthy of being worshipped by the gods. So these are the 5 verses on enlightenment. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you very much. We will now go into the Q&A session. So I guess I'm sure you have lots of questions. As the Swami said, we have actually something called Ask Swami in the Vedanta Society of New York, and you can send your questions there. But right now we have a moratorium on questions because I'm not in New York right now for this year. So a lot of questions have accumulated. I think they have about 300 or 400 questions. So right now we are trying to stop the questions from coming in. But you are free to come here and ask questions. Please come and the volunteers will guide you. Please come up and make a queue there and come up and ask the question. So the first person, whoever is in the queue, can come up and ask the question. Yeah. So there's one person there. And others can also come up. Please tell us your name and ask a question.
My name is Yogesh, and my question is, what do you mean by reflected consciousness or borrowed consciousness? How does mind borrow the consciousness?
Yes. What do you mean by reflected consciousness or borrowed consciousness? The Sanskrit term for this is chidabhasa. Literally means shadow or reflected consciousness. Now, first of all, locate it in your own experience. When we look at our own minds, in fact, when you look at the body, it's not just a body, it feels alive. It feels aware. Upanishad says, I am aware up to the tips of my nails. Nakhagrat. Up to the tips of my nails I am aware. This awareness, is it Brahman? No. Why? Because look at the language. This awareness. Anything that has a tinge of objective, that cannot be Brahman. Interesting. In science, that which is objective is real. And subjective has to be left out. The objective is a dirty word in Advaita. If it's objective, it must be false. So, this awareness that we have in our body, and then look at the mind, thoughts, feelings, emotions. One thing that's common to them, they feel very aware. They feel full of awareness, consciousness. So that is reflected consciousness. We are aware that it's there, that it feels aware, conscious. What is that reflected consciousness? Where does that come from? If you are aware of that consciousness, then that consciousness cannot be the original consciousness. This is a problem. You think about it like this. When I look at the mirror, there are two faces. Not that I'm two-faced, but there are two faces. One is the one I can see in the mirror, and the one is the real one here. Now, one I can see in the mirror is not the real face. It's a reflected face. And what is the real face? I cannot see it directly. Very interesting. The advantage of the reflected face is I can see it. The disadvantage is it's not real. The advantage of this face is it's real, but disadvantage is I cannot see it directly. Similarly, think of the reflected consciousness as the face in the mirror. What is it a reflection of? If you can notice the consciousness in the mind and try to trace it back, you will never get an answer to it. You will just be that. If you ask the question, how can the mind reflect consciousness? The answer is it cannot. First answer. The second answer is it can. Why? Because after all, in Advaita Vedanta, what is the mind or the body or the universe? Ultimately, it is nothing other than consciousness. If it is nothing other than consciousness, it's not something completely radically different from consciousness. So it should be able to somehow be aware. But it's a fact. Mind is aware. Body is aware. We'll leave it at that. Question.
Thank you, Swamiji. My name is Piyush.
Yes.
I have multiple sclerosis, and in this journey that I have taken since the last 4 years, your words have gotten a lot of comfort for me. And I don't know what it is to be enlightened. You said that the one who says, I know, is not. I suppose you can say that the one who's speaking is not enlightened, if you know what I mean. If you understand that, if I can tell you my understanding of the essence of all Advaita Vedanta, it is that ultimately we're robots made of meat. That's the best I can. I have a wife. What is the Advaita Vedanta perspective of bringing a child into this world with that understanding?
Yes. Now remember, what is the Advaita Vedanta perspective? He says of bringing a child into the world from that Advaitic understanding. After enlightenment, what will happen to the world? What will happen to your body? What will happen to your relationships? They will continue the way they are. Advaita Vedanta says, after enlightenment, three things continue. What are the three things? the experience of the world will continue, the appearance of the world will continue. The world will continue to appear. Things will appear, bodies will appear, people will appear, just the way they were appearing earlier. One. Second, use will continue. Transaction. Car will still work after enlightenment. If you're thirsty, water, if you drink water, it will quench your thirst. It will still work. And so all the uses in the world, money will still buy things, less and less every year, but still buy things. So transactions will continue. And third, language will still work. So the names that you continue to use, you can continue to use them the way we speak now. We can speak. In fact, Advaita strongly encourages you to continue speaking in a normal way after enlightenment also. Because I see enthusiastic people all the time writing to me, I who am pure consciousness, thank you very much Swami for your teachings, I who am pure consciousness in the body and mind of Mr. Mishra, I am writing to you who are none other than pure consciousness in the body and mind of Sarvapriyandanda. Advaita Vedanta says, don't do that. Speak normally, just behave like everybody else. Language will continue to work. So in Sanskrit, the nama rupa, name and form will appear, and vyavahara, transactions will appear. But then what is the difference? Difference is an answer to your question. The difference is this: you know that it is all an appearance in one existence, consciousness, bliss, which alone is real and which you are. Now bring the light of that understanding into your day-to-day activities. Overcome fear, overcome clinging, overcome narrowness. All the great problems of samsara are overcome. Then samsara becomes leela. So all relationships, parents, husband, wife, children, householder, monastic, all of them can continue, but all lit up by that awareness which you have got now. Your life will become a blessing and you will become a blessing to others. Yeah, very good. Yes.
Thank you, Swami. My name is Rangan. I have two questions.
Yes.
First question is, what is bliss and why are we looking for it? And second question is, what is time according to Vedanta? Thank you.
Okay. What is bliss? Happiness, joy, we all understand. Sukha. Why are we looking for it? Well, what we are looking for, if you're looking for it, it must be something that's pleasant, something that's agreeable, something that's nice for us. Now, why are we looking for it? If you ask, the deep answer is, we are doing nothing but looking for ourselves. Our real nature is that bliss. So what we are doing is looking for completeness, looking for wholeness, looking for infinity. What we find unbearable is limitation. No matter how rich you are, no matter how healthy you are, no matter how many relationships you have, no matter, you still want more. Now, that is not the way to satisfaction. There is no way of getting satisfaction of infinity from limited things. You cannot find infinity in finite things, in samsara. But that infinity you already are. We are looking in the wrong direction. Look inwards. How do you look inwards? This is how. Spirituality teaches us to look inwards. So we are really looking for completion. We are really looking for, in Sanskrit, purnatvam. And that is our real nature. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji, for reciting and explaining these verses of enlightenment. My name is Ulas.
Yes.
My question is, Brahman does not need enlightenment.
Yes.
It's only the mind which seeks it. And as you said, you follow the mind back and you come to a blankness. You said, try and bring that light into your daily activities. How can any such intent or motivation that comes from the reflection result in anything? Result in enlightenment?
Yes. Now, this is a very natural question to ask. When you are studying Vedanta, at one point, everyone will come to this question. And there are different points, different ways of putting this question. One way of putting it is, who is seeking enlightenment? If I am Brahman, then who is seeking? Is Brahman seeking enlightenment? Another way of putting it is, who is in ignorance? Can Brahman ever be in ignorance? Can the sun ever be in darkness? Or a third way of putting it is how Gurudas put it, is that mind, the reflected consciousness which you're talking about, all this is an effort from that reflected consciousness. What can it result in? It's not real in itself. So the answer is this. Never make these distinctions within yourself. You are one. It's not that sometimes you're Brahman, sometimes reflected consciousness, sometimes mind, sometimes body, sometimes this, sometimes that. No. You are Brahman again, throughout, through and through Brahman. Now right now, this is a matter of theory, something that I've heard, something that I've read. I might even be convinced by it, but I do not see it clearly. I cannot say honestly 100% at least to myself that I know that I am Brahman. If you did, no problem. So right now, we must say that that same pure consciousness, infinite, unlimited consciousness, is somehow not aware of its own nature. Somehow I see this mind and body and an awareness which is being called reflected awareness, and I must make an effort to realize myself as I am. So don't say, what will be the result of the movement from a reflected consciousness? What can it do? No, it's not a reflected consciousness apart from the real consciousness. Whenever there is reflected consciousness, whenever there is a reflected face, what will surely be there? Mirror, of course, but the real face. You say, what can moonlight do? Sunlight is the real thing. What is moonlight? Sunlight. It's moonlight. There is no moonlight apart from sunlight. It is only sunlight reflected from the moon. We are calling it moonlight by convention. It is sunlight. Every functioning of our senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, functioning of our minds, thinking, believing, disbelieving. Shankaracharya says, Yaeva tasya nirakarta tasyeva atmasa. The one who disbelieves and refutes all of this, it is the consciousness of that very one. When you say such a thing does not exist, who is saying that? That same Atman is saying it. Because the mind is not believing it or does not understand it. But it requires that same consciousness. It is an undeniable thing. And don't separate. Say, I am that. I don't know it now. I am trying to know it. Definitely I'll be able to know it. After all, if I am pure consciousness, how can I not know it? Ultimately, I must know it. I will be able to know it. I am Brahman already. What can stop me? Who can stop me? Good.
Madam, my name is Bhuban.
Yes.
My question is that when we are in a dream state, we never realize that everything is me, everything is my mind.
Yes.
So similarly, in the waking state, it's very difficult to get a conviction that everything is me.
Yes.
Especially when there are waves in the mind.
Yes.
So what practices or what can we do?
Very good, very good. I'm glad you asked. This one thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention. That it was a dream, it was all in my mind. The only way to know that is to wake up. Snap out of the dream. After that, people will say, oh, there's lucid dreaming also. Yes, you can do that. But that means in some sense you've woken up. Now, here is the thing to know. To wake up from a dream, you have to go from a dream state of the mind to a waking state of the mind. But to wake up from samsara, to wake up from ignorance, you don't have to go into another state of the mind. Whatever state of the mind is, it's all within samsara. Because it's a state of the mind. Anything that comes and goes cannot be enlightenment. Brahman is not something that comes and goes. It's always there. Even when you know it, it's there. If you don't know it, it's there. You believe in it, it's there. You don't believe in it, it's there. One Swami in Himalayas, when we used to attend his classes, would say to us in Hindi, I'll translate. ये बड़ी उल्टी दर्शन है महात्मा जी. This is a very strange philosophy, O Swami, O Mahatma. तुम जानो या ना जानो, मानो या ना मानो, तुम ही राम. Whether you know it or not, whether you believe it or not, you are Rama. Rama means God and Avatar. So it's an undeniable reality within us. Now, how do I know it? So first point is, you are not being asked to go into another state. Right now, in this waking state, here, we can know it. How do we know it? We must awaken to ourselves as consciousness, as awareness itself. And that is done by this Vedantic teaching. What is the approach here? Study, there's hearing, thinking about it, meditating upon it. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Any kind of knowledge you want in Berkeley University here, that's what you do. You listen to it, you study it, think well upon it, and then assimilate the teaching. You absorb it. You simmer in it, like vegetables you're cooking. After it's done, you don't remove it immediately. You let it marinate. You put a lid on it. What's going on? It's marinating. So I have read it, I have heard it, I have thought about it, I'm convinced about it. Stay with it until you can honestly claim all my problems are solved. So that is the way. Yes.
Swamiji, my name is Shubhajit Sen.
Last one. Okay.
So my question is, so we have one consciousness, yet each one of us experiences are different. So the consciousness emerges, evolves into different experiences for each one of us. So is it that a mainstream of consciousness has again evolved into several quanta of consciousness, and that has given forth mind, body, and then karma? So some clarity into that.
Right. Notice you say that we have different experiences if you are one consciousness. But different experiences, where does the difference come in? It comes in different bodies and different minds. Is it not so? It requires different bodies, different minds, different perspectives to have different experiences. Consciousness in itself is one and the same. And when you say evolved, it's not that consciousness is evolving. In Advaita Vedanta, consciousness cannot evolve. It's an unlimited awareness. But what can evolve is mind and body, which are appearances in consciousness. Advaita Vedanta is not against evolution, of course. In fact, whether Vedanta or any Indian philosophy, evolution was understood in its own way, in that way, long time ago. Monier Williams, who compiled the first Sanskrit English dictionary, he writes that these ancient Indians were Darwinists 1,000 years before Darwin. But evolution is in nature. Swami Vivekananda says it very clearly. Not evolution of God, evolution of nature and manifestation of God. So it's a manifestation of consciousness, and the way it manifests through this network of Maya, that evolves. There is evolution there. Okay. You're done? But this lady is there. Ask your question. Yes.
Probably on the last one.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that this was pretty heavy and powerful. So, is there a book that you recommend for us that we can read and continue to be enlightened?
Swami Vivekananda's complete work, especially if you don't want all the 9 volumes, the 4 yogas, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga. And Manisha Panchakam is available on the net as a text. And actually I have explained, I have given a series of talks which was given in Phoenix earlier this year. And somebody was there? Somebody attended here? Oh yes, of course. You're also there. So those are on YouTube. If you Google Manisha Panchakam, you will find a series of talks which explains each verse in detail. Very good. Thank you so much. It was a delight.
Thank you very much, Sarvapriyananda ji, for delivering such enlightening speech on the 5 verses of enlightenment. Thank you all for attending lectures for these 2 days. We are extremely sorry for not taking all the questions. I know you have plenty of questions on Advaita philosophy, but Advaita is a philosophy. At the same time, Advaita is the way of life. I would request you, try to take Advaita as the way of life, not for intellectual jugglery, but to make and see yourself as a transformed individuality, which is the way of life. Please try to take Advaita in this way, so that we all can be transformed by the tremendous powerful principles of Advaita. Feel it, think it, digest it, and allow it to transform our own life. Thank you very much for attending these 2 lectures. Thank you for the first Christ Church scientist of giving us first Church of Christ scientist, Berkeley, for allowing us to organize this 2 days lecture series. This is a beautiful, the ambience and the church, and I thank the organist of this church, Mr. William Ludwig. He is not here, he left for playing this beautiful pipe organ. So actually in a very short notice we got this church, because when we found that the registration has crossed the limit of our capacity of Vedanta Society Berkeley's auditorium, so we had to contact with this authority of this church, and kindly they have allowed us. So thank you. I convey my gratitude to them. And we have 2 centers, Vedanta Society Berkeley, and we have another center in San Jose. Try to keep connected and keep contact with us. Thank you all.